All right, Caleb will give us a wonderful presentation, I'm sure.
So I'm presenting on Masada, and the fort and Roman camps there in the palace. A little bit of background information. It's located southeast of Jerusalem, near the Dead Sea. And the remote location, because it's in the middle of a desert next to a sea you can't drink out of, made sure that no one really went there and disturbed it in between the last time it was used, which was in the 600s, roughly, and today.
BC.
AD.
Oh, you mean AD?
AD.
Okay.
600s AD was the last
Okay.
time there was a functioning group of people living there.
Okay, I got you.
It was constructed by Herod the Great during his reign, sometime between 37 BC and 4 AD, and during the Jewish Revolt in 73, or at the end of the Jewish Revolt, the revolt started in 67 AD, but it ended in 73 AD. It was besieged by the Romans, leaving behind one of the more complete Roman campsites in the world, in addition to the palace itself.
Yes.
So at the summit of Masada, which is what you see here, it's an open plateau on which Herod built the majority of the palace. The western palace is the one that was on there, and it was about 12,000 square feet, not including a second story, which there's evidence of. There's a place where there's stairs, but they don't know how much of the first floor had a second floor on top of it. There was also a stable that the zealots during the revolt turned into a synagogue, and there's a room that's today called the Lot's Room, which has shards of pottery that all have names inscribed upon them.
Lots of pillars of salt.
Not pillars of salt here.
Oh, that's too bad.
Different lot.
That was his wife.
Yes.
Not him.
Which is where it's presumed that the members of the insurrection, they cast lots to see who would be killing who, because none of them wanted to be taken alive.
Hence, no apostrophe in your text.
Yes, lots as in the plural of lot, as opposed to the room belonging to someone named Lot.
Be quiet now. Go ahead.
There's also a large water cistern that you can actually walk into. It has 64 steps to go down to the bottom, which is where the only survivors of that siege were found. It was 8 women and children who were hiding down there. And then the one later addition to the site was a Byzantine church where a group of hermit monks built and maintained until the Byzantine Empire lost control of Israel. So the northern palace is this little 3-step thing here, which there's a big chasm in between it and the rest of the network on top there. It was built as a more private area and included the actual living quarters when King Herod was staying there. It was built on that small outcropping that you saw, and this made it the final fallback position if he was ever going to be defending the palace, which didn't happen during his lifetime, but it kind of showed his, some call it paranoia or just backup plan-minded.
It's just redundant systems.
Right, a system of construction. Even when he's building himself this palace, it's also a fortress at the same time. It had 3 levels. The lower 2 both required major retaining walls, similar to what was built for the Temple Mount, to make them sturdy enough to actually build on top of. And the top layer was where his living quarters were. The middle layer has a large dining hall where we can see the bases of Roman-style columns, but none of them are still standing. And the bottom layer had a smaller hall and a bathhouse in it, where the bodies of 3 men and a woman's braided hair were discovered, presumably rebels from the revolt. The camp, and that's supposed to say ramp, but the picture covers up the bottom of the P. So the camp and the Rameau. On the western side of the Masada Plateau is a large pile of dirt, which clearly did not occur naturally. During the revolt, the place was unassailable by the Romans. The only natural path to the top gets so narrow that two people can't walk side by side at some places. And as you're walking up the whole way, the walls are looking down on you. So while they were defending it, if the Romans had to march up single file line, you can just drop rocks on them, you can't get up. And there's no way to carry any major equipment or anything, so even if you reach the gate, you're just going to be banging on it with your fists or swords. A very, very secure position. So the Romans had 15 times as many people, about 15,000 people were in their army versus 960 rebels. Didn't help them walking single file up. To get around this, they built a ramp on the western side of the plateau, which has been worn down a bit in the last 2,000 years, but at the time, they built a siege tower that just went straight up the ramp to the wall instead of taking the path, and they went over the side. It took them about 2 months to build the ramp from when they started.
When you went there, which way did you get up to the top?
I took the cable car.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to, it was...
The Romans would have liked that.
Yeah, the Romans would have really appreciated if there was a cable car.
I've gone up all three ways. There's three ways. You can go up the snake path, you can go up the cable car, of course, and you can, if you approach it from the other side, you can go up this ramp.
Right, yeah. My dad took the snake path, but he had done it before. I took the cable car because it was hot.
It's very, very hot.
And so...
A lot of times they close it.
Yes, because it gets too hot.
That's what they do now, you know, because people are wimpier. They close it. They don't want people to die, I guess.
Right.
So even if you get there, say, when it opens, sometimes they'll put up a little sign. Like, we had a group, and about 8 people started up, and then some others used the restroom. By the time they got out of the restroom, you couldn't walk. They wouldn't allow people to walk up anymore.
That's funny. But when the Romans did breach the wall with their tower and ramp, they found what Josephus described as a citadel of death. Everyone except those 8 women and children had killed each other to avoid imprisonment and Roman humiliation, except for the last guy who had to kill himself. That was what the casting lots was about. Jewish law, suicide's a big taboo, absolute no-no. So they said, well, it's not killing yourself if we all just agree to stab each other, but that still leaves one guy at the end who lost all of the casting of lots, who had to kill himself.
Perhaps they could mount the swords in rocks, and the 2 guys could stand next to each other, and you know, like I could push you down on your sword, you could put mine simultaneously.
Maybe.
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
There's a good chance they didn't have swords.
Yeah, they did. Go ahead.
So these are 2 of the Roman camps that were built, and a little bit of the containment wall that you can see in the bottom of this picture right here. So when the Romans showed up, the first thing they did was actually built a wall on the ground all the way around Masada so no one could get out, and then they built camps circled around it just to make sure that no one could leave, and so they show the uniform nature of the Roman legions and how the Romans reacted to fortresses that they couldn't assault directly. First surround it, build a wall around it, and then do whatever it takes to assault it directly, like building a giant ramp on the side of a mountain. One of the main problems attacking Masada for the Romans was that the rebels actually had more food than the Romans did. Like I said, it's a desert there. You're right next to a lake, but you can't drink out of it because the water's too salty. Whereas the rebels had stores and stores and stores of food and these giant cisterns full of water. And so when the Romans did breach the wall by building the ramp, the rebels burned down most of the fortress, but they left all of the food intact to show the Romans that we did this because we didn't want you to capture us, not because we couldn't last longer than you. Just kind of making a final statement with it. And then there's this little Byzantine church right here, which sometime during the 5th century, monks built it. Not much is known about them. But they didn't want to be bothered by anybody, so they picked the top of a mountain in the middle of the desert. There are some very pretty mosaics there that you can see, some of them depicting communion. There's this one here, and that's kind of the area they built. They picked an empty spot and built something new. They didn't repurpose any of the existing structures as far as we know.
Very nice school.
As an archaeological site, it was rediscovered in 1828 by an American missionary, and the first two people to actually climb the mountain were a different missionary and an English paper in 1842. And it wasn't until 1859 that any Israelis started doing excavation or any archaeological work there, and then it really took off in 1963 when Yigael Yadin, Yigael Yadin took over, and he was a former army officer for the Israeli military. Yeah, chief of staff.
Yeah.
And today, the site is managed by Israel's National Park System and the Israeli Antiquities Authority, and it was declared as a World Heritage Site in 2001. And my sources.
Thank you. Any questions? There is one.
About Herod's palace, how would anyone been able to, like, what was the way to get from?
There were stairs between them.
Like outside, or were they carved inside?
They were carved into the side of it. There were probably walls that covered the staircase when it was looking nice.
You'll see it next summer, most likely. All right, who's the next volunteer? It could be victim. Lane does not seem to be ready.
I can go, it's just.
Christian?
Sure.
All right, we'll go with Christian.
Very short. There I go, Christian. I got this. That's very short. Be ready, guys. Oh, looks like you're competing with me then, for shortest. Tell us about that. That's why.
Petra.
That's what you have.
That's right. Oh man, what's Masada's rate?
Wow.
4.7.
So you're saying that Christian has a 4.7 rating on Google. That's great. I didn't know people, I didn't know that you were so popular with the Googleites, or the Google, whatever they're
I
called.
make fake accounts that I rate myself.
Yeah, well, that's how to do it.
Yeah.
And then you pay to get your kids in college. All right, let's talk about Petra, the rose red city half as old as time. That's a poem about Petra. Go ahead.
Petra. All right. Well, Petra is located in Jordan, and it's 150 miles south of Jerusalem, in Amman, which is the capital of Jordan, and the Red Sea. It was a great place for trade because of the location, and it is one of the seven wonders of the world. The city dates back to the 4th century.
The modern world,
Of the modern world.
not the ancient world.
The modern world. Yeah, I tried looking up if it was the ancient or the modern.
Yeah.
They just kept saying one of the seven
Well,
wonders.
It's
So
good for the PR. Okay.
it's also known as the Rose City because of
See?
the color of stones used in the buildings. The Nabateans were the ones that created Petra as a trading post. The land had no water, so they had to use either one of like floods in order to provide city water for the city, or try and have some of the rainfall and preserve it. They were attacked by the Greek in 312 BC, but because they knew the land really well, they defended themselves by using the mountains to their advantage and held them off several times. It was not until the Romans ended up coming in 106 AD that they ended up surrendering. The Romans changed the name to Arabia, Petria.
Petria. I
Petria.
think you got an extra E in there.
My fault. My fault.
That's all right.
The Romans ruled over for 250 years until an earthquake destroyed a lot of the buildings. Basically, the city, after the earthquake, no one really wanted to repair it. Everybody basically left it alone. And it was until historians ended up focusing on the city because of the unique architecture. It was Swiss explorer, which I'm going to butcher his name,
Johann
Johann
Ludwig Burckhardt.
Burckhardt
Burckhardt.
was the founder of the quote unquote founder of the city. Since it was mountainous, it was very impressive for the city, for a city to be established there. Archaeologists can see the difference of what was built by the Nabateans and what was built by the Romans. The Romans created the Petra Road towards the city. They could see that the main gates of the city was the influence of the Romans, so it was a Roman style. And in 1993, they found scrolls that dated back to the Byzantine time period.
In the church.
The Kazna, famously known for being in the movie of Indiana Jones, I believe The Lost Ark. Not
No.
No?
Last Crusade.
The Last Crusade. All right, not a
At least
fan.
keeping track.
Yeah. Many of the tombs contain niches or small chambers for burials. They're cut into stone walls. They have not found any human remains there, so found that interesting. Probably somebody just took it because they, probably just walked in there.
Maybe the monk buried him,
Maybe.
from the movie.
Oh, I was gonna say maybe. I don't know. I don't watch Indiana Jones.
What?
Yeah, I've never seen them.
Oh man, no, don't tell me that. I got a
Last
great
Crusade really isn't that good.
That's what I agree.
He's the patron saint of archaeologists, and you've never even watched his movie, so I don't know. It's going to be hard for me to overcome that.
Watching in class.
Not in class.
Archaeologists suggest that it's supposed to reflect Alexandria. The lower level has the Greek twin gods Castor and Pollux, who protected both of the living and dead on their journey. There are no inscriptions or ceramic evidence associated with the tomb that allows us to date it. There's the high place of sacrifice and the theater. Not sure why that's still there. That's on the next slide, but the theater looks like it was made by the Romans, but it was actually the Nabateans. But it was enlarged by the Romans, so I guess like the Nabateans started it off. The high place of sacrifice is like right above, I guess, the theater, and it's a 30-minute walk up there.
I'd be hard pressed to get up there in 30 minutes. But
Yeah?
Yes, I get if you were running.
They sacrificed animals for the gods Tashusa and Al-Uzza.
Yes.
That's the statue that I was talking about. They found the head, but they could not find the torso, and it's dated back to the Byzantine Empire. For the urn tomb, it was built in 70 AD for King Malichus II or Artaeus II. According to Greek writing, there was a cathedral inside in that writing. It dates back to 447 AD, and the tombs measured to be 18 by 20 meters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Any questions? Yeah, Petra. Masada I've probably been to six or seven times. Petra I've been to like, I don't know how many times. 12? A lot. Sometimes in one summer I would take 3 groups there. That's kind of their guide. So, yeah, you've got some good stuff here. It's a great site. This talk was about Petra, which he mentioned Alexandria. I assume he was referring to this one, because Petra's architecture is a mixture of Egyptian and Greek, and then later Roman.
There's a lot of stuff.
And so now, let's hear about Alexandria, the great city of Big Al.
All right. So, yes, my presentation is about Alexandria. So, the origins. It was founded in 331 BC by Alexander the Great, and it was named after him. It was primarily constructed by the chief architect known as Dinocrates.
It's all right, keep going. I've got an idea.
Okay. Well, so it was built to kind of be the link between
There we go.
Greece and the Nile Valley because it was it basically turned into a really nice port city. It made things really convenient between the two empires. And at its height, it was second only to Rome as the largest city in the world. So that's pretty impressive for at the time. All right. The history of it. So, as I mentioned, after it was founded by Alexander, he died actually shortly after he conquered that area, and it fell under Ptolemy, which started the Ptolemaic era, which actually lasted for a couple hundred years. It eventually fell into the hands of Rome during their massive expansion, and it kind of stayed in Rome's hands for a long time, even after the fall of the Roman Empire still kind of maintained with them. But it wasn't officially conquered until 641 AD by the Arabs, and that's significant because that ended 975 years of Greco-Roman rule, so it was under their control for a really long time. Then after that, it kind of passed between different empires and dynasties, including I don't know how to pronounce it, Ayyubid. Yeah, then it fell to Crusaders in the Middle Ages, then eventually Napoleon conquered it, and then we're getting into modern times.
You had the Mamluks in between.
Yeah. All right. So the design. So ancient Alexandria, it was divided into three main regions. There was the Bruchium region, which was kind of the Greek portion of the city, and that contained the more wealthier people. That's where they lived in the more magnificent buildings, the better places to go. The Jewish quarter, it made up the northeast of the city, and that's where obviously a lot of the Jews lived at the time. And the Rhakotis section, it was primarily made up of the Egyptian population. And it was consistent with the grid-like pattern of other cities such as Rome, and that was the overall design. There was also a lot of canals throughout the city to make travel and movement easier. Okay, well, that's supposed to be a picture of Pompey's Pillar, but that didn't happen. What's cool about Pompey's Pillar is that's one of the only remaining monuments from the ancient era. Almost everything else has been totally destroyed. But it was originally a part of a temple, and it was built in 297 AD to commemorate a big Roman victory. And the pillar stands 30 meters high, so it's pretty significant. Like, this is a really tall artifact.
It's lovely.
Yeah, it's really cool if you could see it. So, the Library of Alexandria. This was kind of what...
You got a picture of that?
Well, no. Well,
Okay.
not an actual picture of
It
it.
doesn't exist.
Well, yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. But what the picture was, it was kind of it was a painting of what it was
Okay.
supposedly looked like. But yeah,
It
that's,
kind of looks a lot like Pompey's Pillar
yeah.
in this one.
Yeah, you're right.
Actually,
Yeah.
It
So-
looks narrower, yeah.
So the Library of Alexandria was kind of like its staple point. That's what Alexandria was really known for, and it was considered to be by far the greatest library in the world. This was kind of a wide estimate, but it was thought that there was between 40,000 and 400,000 scrolls, which was unheard of at the time. And because of this library, the entire city itself kind of became a center place for knowledge and culture and learning. And that's what it got its reputation for. But the library itself, it declined over time. What happened was there was a time period where a lot of intellectuals were removed from the city. And another part of it was Julius Caesar accidentally burned it while he was in Alexandria when he was conquering it. So that's kind of a big oops by Julius Caesar. The lighthouse. So this, yeah, another great picture. This was one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. It was, of the ancient world. It was built between 280 and 247 BC, and it was estimated to be over 100 meters high, which is around 330 feet. So that is a very tall structure. And it actually lasted a really long time, but over that time period, a lot of earthquakes badly damaged it, leading it to partially collapse. And the last remnants of it were destroyed in 1480. And I believe what the remnants were used for was to build a fort on the site that's now there. I don't remember who it was who built the fort, but yeah, he kind of trashed what was left of it. Although this was kind of cool that very recently they actually found some remnants of the lighthouse in the harbor next to where it was. So I thought that was really cool that there's still anything left of it. And if I'm not mistaken, it was the third longest surviving ancient wonder behind the Pyramid of Giza and I think it was a Colosseum of some sort. Not the Roman one, but a different one. I could be wrong though. All right.
Maybe the Colossus of Rhodes is what you're thinking.
Yeah, that might be it. Okay, so, oh boy, I think it's pronounced Kamel Dika, and what it was, you can't tell, but it was the remains of a Roman amphitheater. Yeah, this is struggling. It was the remains of a Roman amphitheater, and the reason I wanted to bring this particular site up is because it kind of highlights the fact that there was Roman architecture and Roman rule in the city, because this is literally exactly like something you would find in the city of Rome. And this place was actually discovered accidentally. I think it was back in the 40s when they were clearing the area for housing, and they just kind of happened to stumble upon these ancient remains. It's also, I also want to just throw out that the general area where this was discovered also has remains of a Ptolemaic temple and several other mosaics, so it kind of gives us a good idea of where to, of the time period that all this stuff was built in. And yeah, that's about it. That's what I got for Alexandria. Sorry about the pictures.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. But yes, I've only been to Alexandria once. So, I did see Pompey's Pillar. Very nice.
Very nice pillar.
It is a very nice pillar. Well, let's see, how much time do we have? Okay. Come on up, we've got a talk about Caledonia.
Zoom it out so you can see the whole slide, like you did for the last one.
Yeah, that is. If I do more, it's going to cut more of it off.
I think it's like two.
Yeah.
It's one big.
It's one big thing. Okay, yeah, that's not bad. There you go. Let's hear about Caledonia, not to be confused with New Caledonia.
Yeah. There's actually a few Caledonias in America, I think. So
Yeah.
that's
In the
to
South
not be
Pacific
confused.
as well.
Yeah, to not be confused, this is the Caledonia on the British Isles. So this was known for quite a while as the Pictland, actually, by the Romans.
Pickland.
Pictland, yeah. It was home to who the Romans called the Picts. It was located in the northern area of the British Isles, specifically north of Hadrian's Wall. It was inhabited, like I said, by the Picts, and that was the Roman word for it. I think it actually came from a name meaning like a face on a coin. I can't exactly remember, but I think it actually has to do with the word like depiction. But their true name that they called themselves was the Caledoni, and it was from a Celtic Gaelic phrase meaning tough-footed or long-enduring, which is something you can really see with the character of these people because they were kind of hard to conquer. Even if they were like more or less not strong militarily, you couldn't really get them to do anything for the longest time.
I think a more accurate description is never conquered.
Yeah. So, like I said, they were located north of Hadrian's Wall and even past the Antonine Wall.
And the Firth of Forth.
Firth of Forth. Yeah, that was my favorite.
That's one of my favorite firths.
And the Caledonians themselves were originally scattered tribes that kind of united to create a resistance to the Roman invasion. After this unification, they actually eventually developed into modern-day Scotland and the Highlands and Lowlands, what we know today. It took a while, though. But to focus more on the Roman aspect of it, I'm going to talk a little bit about Hadrian's Wall and how it acted as a super important shield against Caledonia. So, Hadrian's Wall, as we can see from the thing before, it literally was a just super long dividing line between the southern area of the British Isles and the northern area of the British Isles. And for like decades, it provided cover for the southern conquered area of Britain from the Caledonians. And its importance cannot be exaggerated. After the 195 AD raid into Gaul that the Romans executed, they were really stretched thin and unable to guard the wall as well. And just that slight decrease in guard was enough for the Caledonians to begin to challenge the subjugation of the British Isles totally. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the archaeology in Caledonia. Now, the most obvious archaeological piece is Hadrian's Wall, which you can still see quite a bit of it today. It's actually a lot smaller than it is now. It's kind of hard to see, but in the background there's a person standing next to it, and at that area of the wall it looks like it's only about head height. But it was originally quite a bit taller. Unfortunately, a lot of the rocks were repurposed.
Stolen.
Yes, I like to use a little bit kinder language,
Okay.
though, for other building projects. But one of the more really important objects that I found was this thing called the Staffordshire Moorlands Pan. And it is interesting because it is a Celtic-style metal pan, but it uses, as you can see, Roman lettering and Roman language. And this was probably, like, they found it within Caledonia, but they were wondering if it was maybe, like, either a Roman person or a Celtic Roman citizen living in Caledonia who kind of kept it
Do you
as...
remember where that's located now? If I wanted to go see that in England?
Oh, yes, it's at it's on lease at the, it's between 4 museums. I can't remember all of them.
All right, you can tell me later.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's a Celtic style with Roman engravings, and what's really important about it is that it provides a potential true name for what we call Hadrian's Wall, and they've referred to it, at least the Caledonian people referred to it as the Valli Aelia. I'm not exactly sure what that means, because as they've noticed when they were trying to translate this, a lot of it didn't exactly work in the same like Roman Latin language. A lot of it was like kind of, what is that word for when you mix languages together, or like, we have the word television, and in Russia it's televizion, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's where they kind of grafted it into their own language. But I think it's still kind of cool because it kind of shows the clashing cultures at the time. You have these two radically different groups that are accidentally merging just because they like, hey, these letter things are pretty cool. Instead of using runes, I'm going to use these. So that's pretty much it. But
Okay.
any questions?
All right. Now see, here's a reference to the object. Very good. What do we got? We just got a few minutes. Hang on one second.
Emulate. Just play it on my Nintendo 64.
Well, I will do it this way since we just have a couple of minutes. I can't find that presentation. I might show it to you at a future time. But I spent, not last summer, the summer before, some time in England. I went to a conference and gave a paper. And then I've spent time along Hadrian's Wall. But I decided to explore the Antonine Wall. So I had a rental car, and so I just started driving along the route of it and going out and finding Roman forts and other remnants of the wall, all the way from Glasgow to Edinburgh. So that's pretty interesting. And this summer I will be working near Hadrian's Wall, excavating at a place called Vindolanda. So if you want to take a look at a very interesting site, Vindolanda is was a Roman fort prior to building of Hadrian's Wall, and then maintained that status for quite a while. And then, of course, I actually am going to England for almost 3 weeks, and then I'll come home, and I'm going to Israel for almost 5 weeks. So I'm going to be gone a lot this summer digging here, and of course, you are welcome to join me. Just send me an email. This was also going to be a Roman site, dating back at least the first part, it's just starting, to the to Herod the Great's enclave to the north where he kept his horses. And so we'll see what we find. No one's ever excavated there before. So we'll leave it at that for today.